The thrilling story begins with Loretta, a novelist who had already written many popular books on ancient history. In one of her novels, she described mysterious ancient artifacts that, according to her research, still exist somewhere, waiting to be discovered. Recently, she had written a book titled The Lost City, which included details about an unimaginable treasure, one so valuable it could be worth trillions of dollars and end global poverty forever. Alongside her main characters, Loretta also created a fictional hero named Dash, played by a man named Alan for promotional events. As the book gained immense popularity, Loretta's marketing head Beth informed her that she needed to attend public appearances and promote it further, even though Loretta disliked such events, especially Alan. Despite Loretta's irritation, Alan constantly tried to impress her, though she never liked him back. During one event, when both were on stage surrounded by media, it became clear that the audience was more interested in Alan than in Loretta's writing. Women in the crowd adored Alan's handsome looks and long hair, with one even requesting that Loretta help him undress on stage. Frustrated, Loretta reluctantly played along, only to reveal that Alan's long hair was actually a wig, exposing his secret in front of everyone. Embarrassed, Alan left the stage, while Loretta also walked away, tired of such shallow publicity. But just as her life seemed to be returning to normal, everything changed. After finishing her promotional event and stepping outside her hotel, Loretta was suddenly kidnapped by two men and forced into a vehicle. Luckily, Alan noticed the abduction, but before he could intervene, they had already taken her away. Soon, Loretta was brought to a large chamber, where she met a gangster named Abigail. To her shock, Abigail knew everything about her and her books. Showing her strange symbols in a manuscript, he explained that he had been trying to decode them. Loretta instantly recognized the language, as she had studied and decoded similar ones while writing her novel with the help of her late husband. Abigail revealed that this forgotten language might be the key to unlocking the treasure, and he wanted Loretta to decipher it for him. Abigail revealed one more shocking truth: the map wasn't just a map but a route to an extremely valuable treasure, the same lost city Loretta had fictionalized in her book, and Abigail and his men had actually found that very lost city and wanted to recover the treasure immediately. He offered Loretta a deal: decode the manuscript and he would pay her millions of dollars. Loretta felt something was wrong and refused. Furious, Abigail ordered a helicopter, shoved Loretta inside, and flew off with his crew. Meanwhile, Alan told Beth and her assistant everything: Loretta had been kidnapped. Fortunately, Loretta's watch had a GPS tracker, so they were able to follow her location. Alan remembered a man named Jack, a retired soldier he trusted to do the job for money. Jack would find Loretta and bring her back. Alan called Jack, explained the situation and the location, and Jack agreed to help in exchange for a large payment. With no other option, Alan accepted. They arranged to meet and head into the dense, dangerous forest where Loretta was being taken. Inside the camp, Abigail's men locked Loretta in a wooden house and gave her a final warning. She had the whole night to decode the symbols and tell them the treasure's direction, or they would begin torturing her the next day. Loretta started decoding with no other choice. She could read much of the language, but some words on the map were missing or unclear, which made the task time-consuming. Meanwhile, in the forest, Alan met Jack, and Jack made it crystal clear that his first priority was rescuing Loretta, not protecting anyone else. He told Alan to wait in the car while he went in to get her, but Alan refused to stand aside and promised to help. So both men set out toward the hiding area where Loretta was held. Abigail's territory was heavily guarded, and the guards had strict orders to kill anyone who tried to come through. Jack fearlessly stormed into the compound, taking down the security guards one by one with brutal efficiency. Alan wanted to help, but he was clearly no match for Jack's combat skills. In no time, Jack eliminated the guards and rushed inside to rescue Loretta, who was tied to a chair. As more officers began to arrive, Jack and Alan quickly freed her, placed her on a wheeled cart, and escaped. Loretta had managed to hold onto Abigail's map, and though she was still terrified, a part of her wondered if she too should seek the treasure. For now, survival came first, and they fled as fast as possible. When Abigail heard the news, his rage erupted. He ordered his men to spread out, kill anyone in their path, and recover both Loretta and the map at any cost. Meanwhile, Loretta found herself impressed by Jack's bravery and charm, even as he began flirting with her. Alan, noticing this, grew deeply jealous. He didn't want anyone else getting close to her. Just then, a gunshot rang out, striking Jack in the chest and killing him instantly. Horrified, Alan and Loretta scrambled into a car and sped away. Loretta was still bound to the chair, unable to move, while Alan wiped blood from his face. Suddenly, the car lost balance near a cliff. At the last second, Alan hit the brakes, saving them both from falling, then rushed to untie Loretta's hands and feet. They were shaken but alive, grateful for the narrow escape. Moments later, though, the car slipped off the cliff and was destroyed. Knowing supplies were inside, Alan and Loretta climbed down the cliffside and salvaged what they could. There, Loretta discovered that Alan had brought clothes and food for her, realizing for the first time that beneath his cocky, handsome persona, he genuinely cared for her. She felt guilty for the way she had treated him before. Alan then unfolded the map and pointed out a path that could lead them to a harbor, where they might find a boat or ship to escape. With no other choice, they set out, unaware that Abigail's men were tracking them from the mountains above. The open chair at the camp told the gangsters exactly which way their targets had gone. Deep in the forest, Loretta and Alan followed the map's directions blindly, unsure of what lay ahead. Soon, they reached a river. Loretta insisted they cross it for safety, but Alan hesitated, worried about dangerous creatures in the water. Before they could decide, gunfire erupted behind them. Abigail's men had caught up. Panicked, Alan and Loretta plunged into the water and swam across, narrowly escaping. On the other side, Alan took a moment to admire the valley, relieved they had made it. But Loretta suddenly noticed his back. Several leeches were clinging to him, sucking his blood. Horrified, she realized they had to remove them immediately before it was too late. If we ever get stuck in a situation like Loretta and Alan, where leeches cling to our bodies and keep sucking blood, there are actually very simple ways to deal with it. First, it's important to know that leeches don't transmit diseases, they only draw out a small amount of blood. Many people panic and try to rip them off quickly, but that's the worst thing to do. If you pull a leech off by force, parts of its mouth can remain stuck in your skin, causing infection. The safer method is to sprinkle salt, dirt, or detergent on them. Lemon juice works too, and if nothing else helps, you can carefully apply heat with a lighter until the leech detaches, but be careful not to burn your own skin. Once it falls off, clean the wound thoroughly. Sometimes bleeding continues because leeches inject an anticoagulant that prevents clotting. If that happens, simply press the wound with a cloth or apply pressure until it stops. Following these steps makes leeches far less frightening. Loretta did exactly this. She quickly removed the leeches from Alan's back and helped him recover. But Abigail's men were still chasing them. They could track Loretta's location easily because the fabric of her dress kept tearing and leaving a trail behind. Unaware of this, Loretta and Alan kept moving forward, eventually reaching a rocky landscape. Though exhausted, they were amazed at the beauty of the place, an adventure they had never imagined. Yet danger still lurked. Beyond leeches, there were many wild animals capable of killing and eating humans. Loretta noticed strange symbols carved into the rocks and wrote them down, hoping they might reveal clues later. Meanwhile, gunshots from behind confirmed Abigail's men were closing in. With no other option, Loretta and Alan climbed upward, scaling steep hills until they reached the top. Strange stone structures surrounded them, but reaching the summit gave them a brief sense of relief, and maybe even the feeling that they were starting to fall for each other. Still, Loretta had kept a secret. She hadn't told Alan that Abigail had kidnapped her for the treasure map she was decoding. One morning, as they camped and lit a fire to talk, their bond grew closer, and Loretta studied the map again, trying to crack its code. Alan happened to glance at it and was stunned. He confronted her, demanding to know what she was hiding. Finally, Loretta confessed. Abigail wanted her to decode the map because it led to an unimaginable treasure. Deep down, she also wanted to uncover its mystery. Alan was shocked and felt betrayed, suspecting she might be just as drawn to the treasure as Abigail was. Anger and disappointment grew inside him, yet despite his frustration, he knew he had no choice. He would still protect Loretta, no matter what. At the airport, Bass arrived in the nearby city determined to find Loretta at any cost. He informed all the police officers there about her kidnapping, not realizing that every officer on the island was secretly working with Abigail. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Loretta and Alan kept moving forward until the sudden roar of a motorcycle broke the silence. Two of Abigail's men had tracked them down and were closing in fast, determined to capture Loretta and deliver her to their boss. Alan quickly pulled Loretta aside, whispering that they needed a plan. Though terrified, she agreed. The gangsters spotted a piece of Loretta's dress dangling behind a tree and rushed toward it, only to realize too late that it was a trap. Just ahead was a cliff. Both men rode straight into it and plummeted down. Loretta and Alan's teamwork had saved them once again. Relieved but cautious, they continued their journey and eventually stumbled upon a nearby village filled with locals and tourists. The villagers welcomed them warmly, offering clothes, food, and shelter. At the police station, Alan and Loretta reported Abigail and his men, and unlike before, these officers seemed supportive. That night, the villagers celebrated with music and dancing. Loretta and Alan, now freshly dressed, looked into each other's eyes, their growing affection undeniable. Then, an elderly woman began singing a haunting melody. Loretta froze. She recognized the lyrics from the treasure map. Rushing to the woman, she asked for the meaning of the song. The woman explained it described a place deep inside the forest, a hidden site of great importance. Loretta realized it might be the exact location of the ancient treasure. She and Alan decided to set out immediately. Alan went to fetch a bike so they could move faster, but before Loretta could join him, Abigail arrived with his men. The corrupt police had betrayed her location. Loretta was seized and dragged away. When Alan returned, he was horrified to learn the truth. He gave chase but was outnumbered, captured, and thrown into the same van as Loretta. Once again, both were prisoners of Abigail. Under threat of death, Loretta had no choice but to reveal the treasure's location. Abigail wasted no time. He gathered his men, along with Loretta and Alan, and set out for another island where the treasure was said to lie. The path took them through a range of steep, dangerous mountains. Abigail, impatient and obsessed, pressed forward with 2 armed guards. The trails were narrow and treacherous. At one point, one of his men slipped and fell to his death, but Abigail only pushed harder, determined to reach the cave where the treasure awaited. But now they couldn't rescue him, so they decided to move forward. They crossed over and soon spotted a narrow passage. Alan suggested Loretta try it first since she was smaller and could fit through. After struggling, she finally made it to the other side and signaled for the others to follow. Alan, Abigail, and his man squeezed through as well, and what they discovered left them stunned. Before them lay a massive cave filled with ancient tombs of kings and rulers thousands of years old. The walls were covered in inscriptions that told the history of the island. Abigail's companion realized immediately that these were the sacred gods once worshipped by the island's people. But Abigail didn't care. He wanted treasure. Fixating on one particular tomb, he ordered it opened, convinced the riches were inside. With great effort, the tomb was pried open, but instead of treasure, skeletal remains of the ancient deities lay within. Abigail was furious. He had expected gold and jewels, not bones. Loretta, however, pieced it together. She noticed the crown-like seal resting on the goddess's head. That crown, a gift from her husband, symbolized eternal love. Over time, stories had turned it into a legend of a hidden treasure. Abigail flew into a rage. He had wasted millions chasing what he now saw as worthless. Enraged, he pulled his gun on Loretta and Alan, threatening to kill them. They were helpless and forced to surrender. But his own companion had had enough. Furious that Abigail had desecrated the sacred tombs and insulted their gods, he betrayed him. Though he pretended to follow orders and lock Loretta and Alan inside the tomb, he secretly slipped them an iron rod so they could escape. Abigail left with him, but as soon as they reached the river, the man abandoned Abigail, speeding away alone in the motorboat. Abigail screamed after him but was left stranded. Inside the tomb, Loretta and Alan stared at each other as the cave began to collapse around them. The tomb's opening had triggered its destruction. Just then, Beth arrived nearby with a rescue boat. Spotting her, Abigail waved desperately for help. Beth hesitated, asking if he had seen an American woman, but Abigail lied, claiming he was alone. Against her better judgment, Beth moved in to rescue him, her biggest mistake. Meanwhile, Loretta and Alan, with the help of the iron rod, managed to free themselves. Instead of rushing out immediately, they paused, looking into each other's eyes. Loretta finally admitted what she had long buried. Though she had resisted because of her late husband's memory, she realized the past belonged in the past. With tears in her eyes, she apologized to Alan and confessed she wanted to spend her life with him. Both Loretta and Alan rushed out of the tomb as fast as they could. But before leaving the cave, Loretta quietly slipped off her wedding ring and placed it inside, leaving behind the last symbol of her past. It was her way of saying that from now on, she would focus on her future, not on memories that held her back. Almost immediately, the ground began to shake violently. A massive volcano erupted in the distance, spewing molten lava that tore through the forest with unstoppable force. Flames consumed the trees, animals scattered in terror, and the once lush jungle turned into a blazing inferno. The heat was unbearable, each breath felt like swallowing fire. The ground behind them split open with deafening roars as molten lava surged through the forest, devouring everything in its path. Trees that had stood for centuries went up in flames within seconds, their trunks collapsing into ash. Loretta's lungs burned as smoke filled the air, but she and Alan kept running, their hands tightly clasped as though letting go would mean death. Finally, the coastline appeared through the thick haze. Without a second thought, they plunged into the ocean. The water was shockingly cold against their scorched skin, a brutal contrast to the furnace they had just escaped. Steam hissed violently as chunks of glowing magma splashed into the sea around them, sending up clouds that stung their eyes. Loretta fought against the waves, her muscles screaming with exhaustion, but she knew water was their only shield. A single brush with the lava could reduce them to nothing but ash. After what felt like an eternity, the two emerged on the far side of the bay, coughing and gasping for air. Their clothes clung heavily to their bodies, drenched and torn, but they were alive. And then, through the veil of smoke, a silhouette appeared, something floating on the water. A boat. It was Beth. She stood on deck, waving furiously, her voice barely cutting through the chaos. "Over here. Swim this way," she shouted. Hope surged through Loretta and Alan as they forced their weary bodies forward, climbing onto the boat with Beth's help. Relief washed over them, until they turned and saw who else was on board. The man who had kidnapped them, who had dragged them through unspeakable danger, sat trembling on the deck. Loretta's heart dropped before rage quickly replaced shock. Pointing straight at him, she screamed, "That's him. That's the man who took us." Abigail's face went pale. His eyes darted to the edge of the boat as if measuring the distance, calculating whether he could leap into the water and flee. But before he could move, two uniformed police officers, already stationed aboard, lunged and grabbed him. Abigail struggled, shouting incoherently, but his strength was gone. Shackled and defeated, he slumped to the deck. For Loretta and Alan, the nightmare was finally over. Back home, life slowly returned to normal. Loretta, however, could not let the story remain locked in her memory. She poured every moment onto the page: the volcanic eruption, the ancient tombs, the betrayal, the choices that tested her heart. Most of all, she wrote about Alan, the man who had stood beside her through it all. When her novel was finally published, the response was overwhelming. Bookstores couldn't keep it on shelves, readers praised its raw honesty and thrilling narrative. Every copy sold out within weeks, and for the first time in years, Loretta felt both successful and free. She no longer lived in the shadow of her past, she was ready for her future. A future with Alan. In the final scene, Loretta and Alan are shown in a yoga class, laughing quietly as they attempt poses far less gracefully than the instructor. Their smiles carry a warmth of people who have survived the unimaginable and found love through it all. For the first time, peace seemed permanent. But then, just when life seemed settled, a voice broke the calm. They turned, stunned, to see Jack. The man they had believed dead now stood alive, grinning with mischief. He leaned casually against the studio doorframe and said, "The treasure you were searching for? You were looking in the wrong place. I found the real location." Loretta and Alan exchanged a wary glance, suspicion written across their faces. They had barely survived their last adventure. Could they truly risk another? Jack smirked, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of danger. "Well? Are you coming or not?" The camera lingers on Loretta and Alan as they hesitate, torn between the peaceful life they've earned and the lure of one final journey. Maybe they'll go. Maybe they won't. But that's a story for another time. And that, dear viewers, is where our tale ends.